we're going to be awarding $1 million to randomly to people who have signed the petition every day from now until the election.
The spectacle of a billionaire standing on a stage, casually promising to hand out $1 million a day to random people, tells you everything you need to know about the current state of high-stakes political theater. When that billionaire is Elon Musk, the theater becomes a circus. Looking closely at that moment, the humor is sharp and a bit dark because the only time the man could get a genuine, roaring round of applause from his own crowd was when he finally stopped talking about the future of humanity and started promising cold, hard cash. That is the ultimate punchline of the whole cult of personality built around him. A massive chunk of his fanbase does not actually care about colonizing Mars or saving the planet. They are just playing a long game of sycophancy, hoping that if they praise him loudly enough on social media, some of his unimaginable wealth will eventually trickle down into their bank accounts. It is a terrible strategy, considering he is historically one of the least generous ultra-wealthy individuals on the planet. But hope dies hard when $1 million carrot is dangled in front of you. However, the real story here is not just about a crowd of desperate people cheering for a billionaire's pocketbook. The real story is the massive, calculated trap hidden beneath the surface of that giveaway. This was never a generous, random lottery meant to celebrate the American electorate. It was a sophisticated corporate dragnet designed to harvest deep, personal information from unsuspecting citizens under the guise of political enthusiasm. When you decode the mechanics of what happened, the brilliance and the audacity of the scheme come into full view. They created a petition, wrapped it in patriotic language, and added a life-changing financial incentive to get people to sign. But the petition was just the bait. The true prize was the data. By signing up, hundreds of thousands of people handed over their names, phone numbers, addresses, and political leanings directly to a private political action committee, America PAC, giving a group of political operatives a pristine database of voters to target, manipulate, and track. The house of cards really started to collapse when the law finally caught up with the rhetoric, forcing a peek behind the curtain. A federal judge in Texas, Susan Hightower, ordered Musk to sit down for a sworn, on-the-record deposition to answer for this entire operation. This stems from a fraud lawsuit brought by two women from Arizona who realized they had been tricked into handing over their sensitive personal data under false pretenses. The court also forced his legal team to hand over internal documents that they had previously tried to black out and hide from public view. When you look at the evidence that has already leaked out, the defense falls completely apart. In a separate deposition, the actual director of America PAC admitted flat out that the winners of the $1 million prizes were never chosen at random. They were meticulously handpicked behind closed doors to ensure they would be good, photogenic spokespeople who would stay on message for the organization. Calling an operation random, when it is actually the exact opposite, is not just a poor choice of words or a bit of harmless marketing hype. It is a foundational, systemic lie designed to manufacture trust where none exists. In any normal legal framework, this kind of bait-and-switch behavior is called fraud. If a regular business ran a sweepstakes and privately picked the winners based on who would give them the best publicity, they would be shut down and fined into oblivion. Yet, when it happens at the highest levels of political campaigning, it is treated as a masterclass in modern strategy. The lawsuit itself is trying to hold them accountable by representing every single person who signed that petition, roughly 1 million Americans. They are asking for about $47 per person in damages, which adds up to a grand total of $47 million. To an average person, that sounds like a catastrophic amount of money. To Musk, it is practically pocket change, an amount of wealth his various entities can generate in the time it takes to explain the lawsuit. This entire situation exposes a glaring, frustrating double standard in how we police politics and money. In many parts of the country, political infrastructure is so rigid that giving a bottle of water to a voter waiting in a hot, hours-long line can be classified as illegal voter bribery that carries jail time. Meanwhile, a billionaire can walk onto a stage, wave a giant check for $1 million, and use it to buy a massive database of voters, and the system spends months debating whether it is a stroke of political genius or a technical violation. It is a dynamic that only works for the ultra-wealthy. If every political campaign started handing out millions to counter each other, the incentives might cancel out. But we live in a world where only a handful of people have the financial firepower to pull off a stunt like this. It creates an uneven playing field where the richest player can simply buy the infrastructure of democracy. For the people who called out this hustle from day one, watching the truth come to light brings a very specific kind of exhaustion. There is a strange modern phenomenon where you can point out an obvious scam, get insulted and berated by a crowd of true believers for being a cynical hater, and then watch those same believers get burned by the very scam you warned them about. When the reality sets in and they realize they were used for their data, they do not apologize for the hostility. They just ask you not to be mean about it because they were simply mistaken. It leaves observers in a tricky spot, balancing the desire to say, "I told you so," with the reality that these powerful figures are consistently being woven into the very fabric of our society. Between massive government contracts and institutional investments, these billionaires are becoming too big to fail, meaning their financial survival is tied directly to the public's economic well-being, whether we like it or not. Ultimately, the long-term fallout of these maneuvers usually hits the average investor the hardest. While the political goals of the data harvest were achieved, the corporate entities surrounding these figures often bear the scars of reality. Take a look at the fluctuating valuations of companies like SpaceX. To the true believers, These companies are invincible juggernauts destined to rule the future. But to seasoned market watchers, they often look intentionally and massively overvalued, pumped up by the same hype machine that drove the petition giveaway. When the stock drops significantly from its peak in a matter of weeks, the billionaire at the top does not feel the pain. His wealth is largely theoretical, tied up in complex financial instruments and collateralized loans. The people who actually suffer are the retail investors and institutional funds who bought in at the absolute top of the hype cycle, believing the myth of the infallible innovator, only to find out that underneath the grand promises and the million-dollar checks, the math just